listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscription Scaled. I'm your host, Nick Frederick. With me today is Anthony Napolitano, who is the founder of Triple C Consulting. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Nick, for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you on. Excited to dive in here today and leverage some of your background and experience to talk about what you've done and what you're doing now and kind of how you're helping merchants with their journey. But why don't we start with a little bit of your background? Tell us how you came to found Triple
Yeah.
C Consulting and some of your history before then.
Yeah, no, it sounds great. Yeah, so I had a very long tenure at HP. So I was there for over 20 years, which is not unusual for people at HP. I mean, it's a great place to work. People love it there. And so they typically have a long, tenure. What is unusual about my background is that really never worked in the core business. Almost my entire career was building and scaling, new businesses, for them. I was in about four of them. Some went really well and some didn't go so well. But I always wanted to, develop new skills. I always wanted to build something for the company. And so it was just a great, fit to get into these, new emerging, spaces. So really almost 20 years of my career have been in building and scaling new businesses. One in particular was a subscription business. So I joined this team pretty early on in the consumer supply space for HP, which for them is basically selling ink cartridges to consumers. And it's if you know anything about that business, it's a fantastic business. It's been one of the most profitable business over the long term that you could really find. But back in 2015 when I joined, they wanted to take to their credit, they wanted to take a fresh look, at, serving customers. And so we were chartered with, is there an alternative to customers buying ink transactionally, right? Which is kind of the traditional model. And so after trial and error, the team landed on this concept of a subscription service. And the concept was selling blocks of pages on a monthly basis that customers paid for, obviously. There was an algorithm developed to monitor ink levels based on your personalized usage, ship you ink before you ever ran out. And so I was in that business for 6 years. When I joined, it was really kind of a project. It grew and scaled to an actual business, which I was then, the leader of for, about 6 years. And so after that business, there was another startup that, just didn't really make it, to market. And so last summer, I decided to leave, the company. And so after, taking a little bit of time off, and
For you.
kind of maybe soul searching, etc.
Mm.
I just started getting into consulting, and it really happened organically. People I knew in my network were knew what I had done, and subscription is super relevant, which I'm sure we'll talk about, today. And so, somebody called me to get, to see if I could help them out, and then, lo and behold, now I have this Triple C Consulting that, I'm doing full time and really loving it. I only focus on subscription. That is quote unquote the niche. But as you know, it's not a niche. It's a very large market.
Yes, it
And
absolutely
everybody
is.
wants to do it. And so I'm finding a quite a large audience of people to kind of chat with.
Did you actually get a real break in there? Because after I left Affinity Group where I worked for 11 years, I was like, I am taking some time off. I was actually at the beach. And then this consulting firm, which I had some great friends at, was like, you need to come over here. You need to come over here. And I'm like, yeah, but let's talk about it down the road. And they're like, no, no, no. We've got a conference coming up and we really need you to attend. And I'm like, oh, come on, guys. So I got all of 3 weeks off between old job to new job. So did you get a real break?
I actually did because I
Yeah.
didn't know kind of what I was going to do next. I just knew it was time for me to move on. Again, love the company, great people. But I really had this passion for subscription. I didn't know anything about it when I started in 2015. It's now, 7 years in, which is, quite a long time,
Mhm.
for this space now.
It is.
And I just absolutely fell in love with it. To me, there was just this, this sense of urgency that I felt in the business that, customers could join every day, customers could leave every day. So you really have to have this customer, centric approach. And it's not lip service. It is the reality, of it, right? Because by the very nature of the subscription, anyone can leave at any time if it's done well. So I just really loved, that customer centric nature of the business. I'm a former finance, person, so data was always really important to me, and really kind of driving a lot of the decision making. And as you know, in subscription, there's a ton of data. So yeah, it just kind of was something that I really, loved. And yes, I did take a couple of months off, and then kind of organically started happening. And lo and behold, that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you kind of answered what was going to be one of my first questions, which was around when you started that business within a business. I like to, entrepreneurship. Did you didn't have a lot of background there in subscription specifically? And I assume the organization itself did not either. So that it's not like there were resources and expertise and processes around subscription, or were there? Was there something you could leverage?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a really a great, question. One of the things I loved about, HP, and I think it's true, at least of my experience there, is I always have had the opportunity to develop new skills, right? So yeah, there were certain businesses where you wanted, to get people from the industry to kind of guide, you through it, kind of what I do now as a
Mhm.
consultant. But at the time, there really wasn't, right? It was really kind of us learning, organically, on the job. So we relied on external perspective though quite a bit, and whether that was attending conferences, reading books, and getting as much content as possible. The one thing that was interesting, that I think was valuable is I always tried to get as many folks who were in kind of similar positions, and always was networking with them and trying, to learn from them, just to kind of not repeat, the common, mistakes,
Thanks. Sure.
right?
Hmm.
That people make as they're entering, this space. And frankly, that's a lot of where I spend my time, with my clients is, guiding them to the common, through the common kind of pitfalls, and basically things I wish I knew. Right, is
Yeah.
basically,
Right.
how I try to position, those initial discussions is, wow, I wish somebody told me this. I started in, 2015. And so no, I had to learn on the job. And there were specific roles that we wanted to make sure were external, because, you don't want to, you don't, you can't afford to learn everything on the job. But, by and large, my team and myself were, basically people that, were really kind of deep rooted in print. We spent a lot of time understanding our customers and really understanding, what the pain points they were feeling, in the industry. And I think that was one of the keys to our success. And one of the things, again, I talk to clients about is, and that's where Triple C comes from, is it's a framework, to help you think through finding the intersection of the value for customers, the company, and the channel. And when I say channel, I mean omni-channel. And the role is to find the intersection of all three of those to successfully launch and ultimately scale your subscription service. And I think to be successful, you have to start with that customer, right? What is it that is their pain point in working with you, potentially you in your company, or the industry in general? And that's very difficult for people to, want to do, because you have to ask some tough questions,
Yeah. Well, I'm
about
real
what can we do better.
Yeah, I'm real curious how you got that data because, you said that it was a transactional business prior to offering this sort of subscription service, right? And typically in transaction-based businesses,
Yeah,
they don't even know who the customer is, right? You're always going through wholesalers and suppliers, so you're kind of at the mercy of what limited data you can get.
that's right.
So we're trying
That's
to
right.
understand where they were at,
That's
what
right.
they wanted, and how they might consume a subscription-based service. How'd you go and gather that information?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the, I mean, typically in general, right? I mean, you start out with, qualitative type research, right? So you have focus groups, with consumers, and you try to understand, what do they really like about, again, your industry, your market, your product, etc. And then you try to focus in on, well, what's missing,
Mhm.
right? What are the challenges that customers are, facing with that? So you kind of start with this kind of high level, let's just have a conversation, right? With customers, and then it gets, over time, once you start getting an idea, it's like, okay, I'm not boiling the ocean here. I kind of have an idea of where, I want to go. Then you start refining that research, right? And then you can start introducing quantitative, type of analysis where you start now talking about pricing.
Mhm.
What is it that, what would people be willing to pay? How many customers do I think I can attract? Are they coming from my existing customer base? Are they new customers? I mean, you start getting into kind of a little more, kind of data driven. But ultimately, what I think is really important, Nick, and I think is sometimes challenging to do, but in my opinion, really is necessary, is piloting, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
building your muscles around the capability to pilot, continuously,
Mhm.
right? Not just, when I first launch, but really piloting, on an ongoing basis. And a pilot can be, as small as an A/B test, right? That, you're going to test, certain uh, dynamics during a funnel to see if we can get more people to sign up, sort of a speak,
Mhm.
sort of a thing.
Mhm.
Or it can be all the way to you take it to market, right? You can go all the way where we're going to take whatever 20 stores. We're going to try a totally different experience. We're going to message what it is, then we're going to pilot it and measure the results, and then, determine kind of the next step. So I think that really needs to be the backbone of a subscription organization. The beauty of subscription, right, is that, it's heavily software based, it's cloud based, it's a service,
Right.
right? So you
Mhm.
have flexibility and agility, right, to be able to modify and test things out. Whereas if it's a product, well, geez, that could be, a 1, 2, 3 year development cycle where I'm making a big bet, and then at the end, I hope it pays off. I think some of the real beauty of subscription is that, you can be really agile. You can test things in kind of a low cost way and really get kind of a feel for, okay, is this really going to go? Do I need to modify it? And then let's keep iterating to get to, something that we really feel good about, that, okay, now let's sink the investment in because we've done all the kind of testing, in the real world,
Yeah.
right? Not just in research.
Okay. I think this thread that we're on and your experience is so incredibly relevant right now because we're seeing subscription in new verticals all over the place, right? And a lot of them are from established transactional based businesses. Everything from, C stores
Yeah.
to QSR, the Taco Lovers Pass, it's just popping up everywhere. And so I think you've got people within organizations, whether they're in product or marketing or what have you, that are saying, "Hey, we want a piece of this consumer engagement, recurring revenue action that's out there, but we don't know how to go about it." Right? And you did that, right? You were within a business
Yep.
that was
Yep.
transactional, and it kind of moved over to that model. So, one question I'm real curious about is: was this idea already there, and you were brought in to execute it and build it up and run it? Or was this an opportunity that you saw already within HP and were like, "Hey guys, we've got an opportunity over here. We need to go pursue this." And then how did you go about that, I guess, building the business case?
Yeah. I mean, I think. Yeah. I mean, I think the to HP's credit, right? They were, um, really externally focused, right, and really looking at, okay, they're the leader in that space, and how do we maintain, how do they maintain that lead? I think that takes a lot of courage,
Mhm.
from organizations, right? And why you're seeing some of the challenges that you see with product companies is because most of them are super successful in what they did, or
Right,
else they wouldn't
right.
be, a company,
Mhm.
right? They would have
Works
failed a
against
long
them.
time ago. So
Yeah.
they have a product. They, yeah, exactly. It can, right? It
Mhm.
really can. And I think, that is, I think, the really the place to start with, your clients and anyone that really is in this space, is really kind of creating that case for change, right? And I have this one slide that I use all the time, like in the first conversation, which shows all of these brands that are synonymous with subscription in D2C. That's really the space that I largely play in, and they're all brands that right? I mean, they're all like the subscription brands, like the Harry's and the Netflix and the Birchbox and the Chewies and all. These are all brands that But the reason I show that slide is none of those guys were the incumbent leader at the time.
Right.
Right?
Right.
They were not
Hmm.
the ones that were the leader in that industry and said, "Oh, well, let's lead that transformation." No, they were an quote unquote outsider outside of that space, saw an opportunity to better serve customers in that space, to provide better value, in that space,
Hmm.
and came in and shook it up, right? So it is not, in my opinion, and you're in this space as well. It's not really an option not to,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? You could choose
Like
not
the
to
way you put
play,
that. Yeah.
but then you are just waiting to be disrupted,
Yeah.
right? That you're it you need to have this paranoia that either I'm going to be the one that's going to lead this transformation and write the rules the way I would like them to be written,
Hmm.
or someone else will, and
Or
I'm going
someone
to
else will.
react
Right.
to them. So it's either lead it or be disrupted. Now, that's easy to say on paper, very hard to do when you have an entire organization that is built around, product, channel, build another product, they sell it. I mean, everything is kind of driven around that. So it's not easy. It's not easy, and it does take leadership from the top,
Hmm.
right, to have this paranoia and this view that we'd either transform or we won't be here in 10 years.
Hmm.
And this is, kind of one of the ways to kind of create a bridge to that future, right, if you will.
Sure.
Now, again, when I started in 2015, I think the space was very different then than it is now, right? I mean, I think you had
Oh,
some
for sure.
examples of success, but now, I mean, you have hundreds of more examples, right, of success, and again, in your space and in mine, I mean, it's hard to find anybody not talking about subscription, and you hit on something that's kind of a hot button, for me as well, because it's the company view of subscription. It's ARR, it's loyalty, it's all like the benefits that you as a company can get from a subscription. But customers are not buying a subscription, they're buying a service,
Mhm.
right? And you are offering it to them in a business model, which is paying for it on a monthly basis, right? Sort of
Mhm.
a speak. And so I think, it's really important that companies get, yes, there's all that goodness that can come with it, but it only comes if you create something that really customers want. Right, you could create everything on a spreadsheet that says, "Oh, look, if I could charge this and I get the customer's LTV for 3 years, it's so much better." Sure, but you need to really focus in on, okay, who is that customer? What problem am I solving? That's one way to say it. Like, what problem am I solving? What value am I adding that they're not getting today?
Yeah.
Right, is really where the focus is. Once you get that, right, and once you have that value prop that you feel the customers are going to sign up and stay, right? The last part's kind of important, that they're going to retain them.
Pretty critical.
Okay, now let's figure out that's kind of important. I know we joke about it because we're in the space, but I mean I mean, I think retention needs to be equal to acquisition, like from day one,
Sure.
right? I mean, and you know that as well, right? If you're not able to keep people in, then you're going to spend a lot of money to keep acquiring, these customers. And so, but once you have that, then now let's figure out, okay, how does this make sense for us as a company? And that gets into this conversation that you were starting to. I was like, okay, well, can we offer them choice? Like, can the transactional model coexist with the
Coexist.
subscription model?
Mhm.
I think yes.
Mhm.
I think yes, and I think that's where sometimes people get tripped up. It's like, well, it doesn't have to be or, it can be and,
Mhm.
right? Because as you know, not every single person on the planet
Mhm.
is going to want a subscription, and so
Yeah.
is there a way that these two things can coexist, and that takes down, let's say, the pressure of the conversation a little
It
bit,
does. Yeah. It creates some
right?
complexity, but it does
It's
make
a
it a
little
little
bit,
softer.
for sure.
Yeah.
Totally right. create confusion? How do you message it? Like, how do you just, is it, where do I talk about one? And I mean, yes, 100% confusion is the byproduct of choice. But it is a way to kind of make it safer, let's say, for a company to, start getting their feet wet, right? And understanding, okay, am I cannibalizing the existing customer? Am I getting someone from a competitor? Oh, okay. Well, is this model, you know, providing something, that the transactional can't? It just allows you to start kind of crafting a story that's relevant for you, right? In your, company versus, oh, we're, burning the boats and this is the only direction to go.
Right.
At some point, maybe, but I don't advocate for that personally, Nick. I mean, I think if, there is a middle ground.
Mhm.
I think that these two things can coexist.
I think you're 100% right. Especially for established, well-known, profitable brands that already are on a transactional model. This is not a wholesale change you necessarily need to go through. Probably don't need to go through, right? You should figure out a way to coexist in those two
Totally.
worlds. But the inverse is potentially what I see as more of a problem today. It's subscription-based businesses that are starting up from the beginning, only
Yep.
offering their service as a subscription and losing out on customers because they're like, I really only need this for a month. I really only need your product one time. And yeah, maybe again in the future. And if I do, then I'll consider subscription. But they're just like, I don't want another
Yeah.
subscription that I have to remember to cancel in
Good
30
point.
days. Like, people don't want that, right?
Yeah. And what's also happening is a lot of those, let's just say, native subscription, um, really start out as D2C and stay D2C, right? Meaning I offer this service,
Hmm.
the subscription, and you get it through my website.
Hmm.
Like your channel, I'm a channel of one. If
Hmm.
you want it, you come, to the which to your point, right? You were talking about, okay, the product versus subscription, which is, I think, is totally valid. The other is where customers can go acquire that, right? Is also
Sure.
something that has to be thought through, right? Let's say traditional product companies, like they have the muscle of channel, right? That is the go to market, right? Is, create a product and someone else sells it, right? I mean, to break it down into,
Right. Essentially.
basics there. So in that, it's an advantage, right? You have scale, right, in that model,
Hmm.
right? You now have reach, where D2C, you have to drive reach to you,
Hmm.
right? Which you can do, of course, but that's costly and marketing and, etc. It, you know, one of the things I like to talk about is, when you offer a subscription, you're by and large trying to change consumer behavior. Again, there are new products and, stuff that comes out all the time, but by and large, industries that exist, they have customers. That's why they're in an industry. And you're trying to get a customer to say, hey, well, instead of just buying it one time, how about, you pay for it, get access to it, get some benefit from it, some value for it. But that's a different way of transacting. Then on top of that, throwing in another, let's say, behavior change, which is, oh, by the way, you can't get that new thing in the place you're used to buying that thing. It limits you, right? It's like, I'm used to going to X. That's where I go get X. And now it's not. Now you're not offering it there, and I got that. Now it's like, wow, okay, that's a big leap for customers, to make. So you see, and you're starting to see it, is, let's say native D2C subscription are starting to move into retail, right, to drive awareness,
Hmm.
right? If you can go to Harry's right now and get a starter kit at Costco,
Yep.
starter kit, you can
Hmm.
buy a starter kit there. I'm sure when you get home, there's a way to subscribe, right? To get, and why? Well, because that's where people buy blades,
Hmm.
right? And so,
Hmm.
so I think there is this interesting dynamic,
Yeah.
right? Product versus service only, direct to consumer channel. That's why I like to talk about omni-channel. I do think there's an omni-channel, opportunity here. It's
Yeah.
not easy, but there is a big opportunity there.
Yeah. I think another good example of this, actually had Coulter Lewis, who's the founder of Sunday, on the podcast. It was over a year ago now. that he came on, and they
Mm,
started subscription because it made a lot of sense, right? If you wanted this organic fertilizer for your lawn, right, you're going to need it at set times throughout the year. It made all the sense in the world. And he didn't announce it, but he alluded to it on the podcast that like we're looking at additional distribution options. And it wasn't a month later that they were on the shelves at
mm,
Walmart, right? So, that's a great
yeah.
example. You don't
Yep.
necessarily need to, if you are a startup, do all of these channels at once, but they should be part of your plan, right? You got to meet customers where they are, and if you want to keep expanding to increase that set of available customers, you need to meet them in different ways.
I think so. I mean, I mean, I think that's my, experience and, my, point of view. I think it's great. The advantage of when you go D2C, right, is you control the end-to-end experience, right? You control the message, you control, the acquisition, the conversion, you get to basically message it the way you want, and you can continually test and improve that. And so I think the benefit of that is you will have all the data, and at some point you should have a really, really, really good understanding of what the recipe is, right? What is the, I call it the 1-2 punch of the value prop,
Hmm.
right? What are the things that are going to draw you in and get you to stay,
Yeah.
right? It can't be 50 things. Yes, there can be, things like, like environmental messages, cancel any time, flexibility. Those are all like secondary messages, but there's
Hmm.
got to be something that people go, whoa, okay, I'm paying attention, and now you got me.
Yeah.
You can get all those things figured out when you're D2C. You know the recipe, so that way when you are ready to scale, you're now more repeating, right, the recipe, that works, versus kind of recreating it. Now you still have to go through a learning curve,
Hmm.
right? What you do on
Hmm.
a website is not the same thing you would do in retail, for example,
Yeah.
or expanding what I do in the US to like Germany. Okay, there are going to be some differences, but I feel really good. I understand the customer and the customer that's attracted to this, and so now I'm ready to go expand. So I totally agree with you. I think there should be a path to how am I going to expand my channels, right? That are beyond just, driving, D2C, conversion, et cetera. It is challenging. There's no question about it. That there are different motivations there, but I think it's worth the effort to try to figure it out once you hit a wall for scale,
Yeah.
right? At some point, you're going to saturate, your ability to drive. And so the next is, okay, let's expand channels.
Yeah. I like your word there, recipe, right? And figuring out what your recipe is, noting the fact that no two have the exact same recipe. Because we get asked all the time, like, well, what should my, churn rate be, my hard decline, soft decline rate, my attrition, my enrollment curves,
Yeah.
by channel, all these sorts of things. And as a consultant, you hate to say the word "it depends," but that is really the answer. It depends.
Yeah.
It depends on your business, where you're at in your
Yep.
life cycle, and most importantly, I think it depends on your product, what it is, how the consumers use it, how they engage with it, how often they need it, um, and figuring out that recipe based upon all of those factors is what you have to do. And to me, this is what makes subscription so much fun from our perspective, is trying to help a business figure out what their recipe is and then execute on it. And I think what we're potentially heading towards in our industry, though, is we've had this proliferation of tools, right, for everything from marketing to communications with customers to billing and payments that we do and everything in between all of those, but they're putting businesses in boxes and saying this is our walled garden of how we
Hmm.
operate. You kind of need to make your product and business work within it, which in some situations is of course fine. You don't need too much blue sky, but
Yep.
we are starting to lose the ability to differentiate because of that, and really create an experience. And by experience, I mean everything from the first solicitation through every communication, from the way that you bill them and try to retain them and everything. Like that is your product. All of those things in between are your product and subscription.
Yep.
It's not a one-time transaction at a store. It's all of these touch points along the way, whether they're
No.
aware of the interaction or not, even, that you need to be able to differentiate. So I guess my question there is, do you agree? And where should, in your consulting gigs that you're doing right now, where do you
Yep.
tell your clients, your merchants, that these are key areas to differentiate, and maybe these are areas where, depending on your life cycle, you can go find a tool or do it the way the rest of the industry does.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a deep that's a deep
I know.
question, a deep
That
long,
pontificated there for a bit.
conversation. I think it really starts with, and you're totally right. I mean, those metrics might be different they will be different, by company A, B, C, D, or whatever. I think the key is um, knowing what the right metrics are. Like and that's where you need outside expertise, I think, to help you, understand what are the key, metrics that I should be measuring, setting a baseline and continually improving on them. Right. I mean, I think those are the big things that you need to continue to, to focus on. Right. I mean, I think, the big ones for me, right, are let's look at, some measure of adoption, conversion, acquisition, and how is that trending over time? Like I always want to see year on year that is getting better. Right. How are my retention? How are my NPS? Those customer kind of focused metrics,
Mhm.
I think are super, super, important, right? That you have a handle on those, things really early on, right? In your life. I have worked with, folks that were in, the meal prep business, the meal kit, business. Their, churn in that business is super high, right? Which is totally different than another business. So, they have to focus, completely on, okay, what is the right type of customer we want to acquire, for example, right? That how do we create an offer that isn't just someone that's going to try it and churn, but kind of can create a behavior,
Sure.
right? It's now I've kind of made it something that I'm just used to doing. Well, that's like that might be totally different than another industry where you may only interact once a year, for example, right? Because it's not something I need, every week or, every month. So yeah, the metrics are probably the same, but what your number should be is going to be very different than what another is. Now on the tools side, which is I think where you were going, with the question, I think that I mean that's an interesting point. That's kind of the life of enterprise software sometimes, right? Is
Yeah.
that it's okay, well it's out of the box it all looks the same, but I can't do anything with it out of the box. It has to get, integrated into my system.
Uh-huh.
So I think it's kind of like it's like always that like make versus buy, right? Like what's the stuff that, I'll just take, it's enough like of the basics, but I have to customize some things because I absolutely need that's my secret sauce. Like that's my recipe.
Yeah.
And that I can't rely on, some out of the box software to go deliver that, for me. I either have to do it myself or get partners to help me build that.
Mhm. Yeah. To use an example, I think 9 times out of 10, when I pull up a subscription website, I can tell whether it's Shopify or not. First of all, 9 out of 10 are, so there's
Yeah,
probably
for
that
sure.
that alone, but you can kinda tell. I know there's
Right.
templates and there's ways to customize it.
You're bound to be right.
You can just tell,
Yeah.
the way the product's presented and then the way it takes you through that flow. So you start going, "Man, these are all just starting to blend together." Do you think that's an area that's important to
Yeah.
differentiate? What are some areas that, especially in earlier stages, they should spend more time on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that early it's really about truly understanding what is it that you're trying to solve, right? Like, so if the templates all look the same, etc., but how do I know, you know, this is the value prop I'm offering, and then continue to iterate on that message. So the messaging, the words you use are super important, right? Back, long story, 2015, long time ago. When I started in this space, we never called anything subscription. In fact, we call it the S word because customers are very averse to the idea that you calling it a subscription, even
Uh-huh.
though it is a subscription. But there's all these barriers, right? That people immediately go, oh no, I can't cancel. Do I really know that I need it? There's
Right.
privacy, etc. So that's improved over time. Like that is definitely more acceptable. But those words that you use, right, and the value you're conveying and the voice, that which you continue to convey that in, I think is really important. So that has to be uniquely you and your brand, right? But that's a journey as well. And we were talking about earlier, product versus service. Those words may not be the same. In fact, many times they're not. the same. And so you really have to kind of build that muscle
Hmm.
of how do I, how am I going to be speaking about something that's a recurring, engagement with my brand
Hmm.
versus, buy it now and I know it, in 2 or 3 years you're going to need it, kind of again. So I think those parts of the recipe you have to figure out, right? Your brand has to figure out, and you have to, create that environment where you're able to deliver on that promise,
Hmm.
to them,
Yeah.
in that, environment. The billing side of it and the back end side of it, again, those can also be constrained,
Hmm.
right, by, kind of enterprise software, you know, um, etc. So I think you have to be, I like to look at things kind of long term, with customers. So try to be generous with them, especially early on, give them VIP, type of experiences. So you might have to override kind of what's like the normal kind of standard,
Hmm.
out of the box functionality.
Hmm.
But let's look at this thing long term, right? If someone, wants a refund, give them a refund. Understand why. If they say they didn't get it, okay, get them another one. Let's not mess around,
Right. Hmm.
with something that might be, let's that's kind of short term like optimization. I think again, the promise of subscription is getting a customer for life. That should be your aspiration, right? That I'm going to get a customer and they will forever consume my service, my product with me.
Yeah.
If that's your view, right? If that's the that's the
Mhm.
perspective,
Yeah.
you know, what they're doing, one or two transactions that may not be quote unquote favorable for you and favorable for them, you
Yeah.
gladly trade that, right, for someone who's with me for 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, of course I'd be. So I think it's really like those places that you want to make sure that the customer feels special. You have to have the ability to override,
Mhm.
right? You can't just go, oh, that's the functionality in the tool. Well,
Yeah.
too bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to fix that.
Yeah. True.
you
Unless you're
know,
something like a diaper delivery service and your customer's just waiting for the day that they don't need you anymore, there's some product components there as well.
that's true. Well, then, yeah, but then you have to have an upsell
There you go.
to like,
Yep.
toddlers,
Uh-huh.
toddler
Right.
sizes,
Take them through the life cycle,
and
full life cycle. Yeah.
get into other product for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, Anthony, if you would take us through a little bit of your consulting methodology. So I guess first question,
Yep.
where in the life cycle are you seeing people come to you? Like what problems are they trying to solve? Are they early on or are they more trying to optimize and grow? And then again, you're kind of like, here's what I'm going to take you through to achieve that goal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. I it seems like the sweet spot of where I'm getting engagement, the most is are companies that have a subscription already, right? That they have something, but it was probably growing during COVID, because everyone was going,
Hmm.
e-commerce, you saw obviously subscriptions kind of explode. And now that things are kind of normalizing a little bit, that, oh, people can go to retail again or, go to other channels or, or just quote unquote, normalizing in general, they're seeing stagnation, right? They're seeing, okay, this was going and now it's kind of flattening out. And so really that space where I can come in and I take them through this again triple C methodology, which is in all these three areas, right? Whether it's customer, do we have a good handle on our customer value prop? And there's a whole set of how we do research, like how do we do piloting, like really what is the 1-2 punch in our messaging, right? What insights do we have about why people are signing up, why are people canceling, why are people not signing up, right? So let's walk through that customer, let's say column, if you will, or area of the Venn diagram, and really understand if do we have a pricing problem, right? Is it
Hmm.
is what is it that we're facing,
Hmm.
in that kind of space, and let's build out. Either we need to pilot something new, we need to maybe change the offering altogether, or maybe it's just like tweaks. Like I'm a big fan of tiers, for example,
Hmm.
right? So,
Sure.
like meaning let's have a good, better, best, right? Type of options. So those sort of kind of customer, focused acquisition and retention strategies is kind of, let's say, one area of work. And then there's others who are really like we were talking about earlier. They're really facing kind of some company dynamics, if you will. I won't say channel challenges, but just dynamics, right? It's like, well, we kind of have this thing here, not really sure how it fits in our overall strategy. Not really sure how to build a business case, to invest in it, or how this should live side by side with the transactional product. So there's that kind of, let's say, this company, set of opportunities.
Do you see ownership
Um,
problems
and then
there?
and then at the end, yeah, or how do I structure it?
Uh-huh.
Like, I mean, that's a big one, right? It's like, well, it's kind of like everyone kind of has a piece of
Yeah,
it,
that's what I mean. Yep.
so
Hmm.
everyone's kind of involved. Do I need to have a structure
Hmm.
like everyone is in one team, or how do I balance,
Yep.
dotted line versus solid line?
Hmm.
That's pretty common, right?
Hmm.
When you have a company that is like a product company, now they want to do this new thing. And again, I spent 20 years of my career doing that, so I have a point of view on what I think works best, right, in terms of of this type of model. So there's that. What key metrics, should I have? How do I build a financial case, around this? How should I be thinking about a subscriber versus a transactional, so there's this company kind of dynamics, and there's a big chunk of work around this omni-channel, right, that we've been talking about, which is like, okay, I've got something, we're doing well, it works for the company, we all love it, but we're hitting a wall,
Hmm.
right? Like we're at, saturation point, and I'm selling 70% of my product into that channel, and I don't, how do I engage them? Right? How do I sell the subscription, through that channel as well? So it's kind of those three areas, I would say. And each client is, different. Some I just advise across all of those. Some is like a project. Let's hone in on kind of a specific, area. It just kind of depends. But I think again that the sweet spot would be, okay, a company that maybe has other lines of businesses. This is starting, but really kind of need help on taking it to the next level, I guess, to use a cliche,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because they've hit some kind of wall in one of those three areas.
Yeah. Yeah. Us talking about transactional companies that have a subscription component, and then how do you work that in, and who owns it, and all of that. It was reminding me of a conversation I had recently, which was ironically the opposite problem. A very well established, been around for
Mm,
decades subscription company that came up with a product that was transactional, a service that was transactional, and had to
mm.
figure out how to deliver that within the mechanics of an organization that is built around subscription. I mean, every process, everybody, that's what they do,
That's
recurring revenue.
unique.
And all of a sudden it was like, we're going to deliver these one-off things. And they're like, we don't know how to project management. We don't know how to deliver it. We're good at selling it, apparently, but we cannot figure out how to put that into our
Imagine.
engine at the moment. So it goes both ways.
Really interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really about, change management. How do you approach it? I mean, those are all kind of common, but yeah, that reverse problem, I haven't come across that one yet.
Yeah, yeah, it was the probably the first time I can think of having gone, or come across that in the opposite way, but just found it fascinating. Um, well, Anthony, this has been a really
Yeah.
fun conversation. I love diving into a lot of these, these topics, and leaning on your experience. If any of the listeners today want to chat with you, learn more about what you do, what's the best way to get in contact?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to my website, triple C consulting.com. You can reach out and contact me there. I'm going to be at the Sub Summit show here. I don't know when this airs, but I'll be there the first week of June. Follow me on LinkedIn. When I do events like these, I, kind of share out a little bit there too as well. So
Yeah,
thanks
definitely.
for having me. It's been great, great
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, definitely advocate for following you on LinkedIn. It's always fun to find the group of us that are networked in this industry, and sharing and learning from each other. So I would definitely recommend that as well. But
It's a pretty small world.
it
It's a pretty small world.
interestingly enough, it is. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I found, and I'm sure you see it too, right? There's a lot of folks who are kind of involved in the space, but they're still kind of learning and don't really have, let's say, the practical experience of delivering or building something. And that's kind of where I step in. I'm not quote unquote traditional consultant, right? In the realm of where I'm kind of theorizing about this. I've actually lived through it, and now that I'm in the space, I'm connected to many others that are going through the same thing. And so, it provides me a lot of experience to bring to bear.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no substitute for experience, for having gone through the war and been in the trenches, you use all those phrases, but that's the reason we started our
Yep, for
business,
sure.
was just been on the other side of that fence, know what it's like, and want to help others not have to go through make some of the same mistakes, right?
Love it.
Awesome.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Well, Anthony, thanks again. Look forward to connecting again soon. I feel like there was a whole lot more we could have talked about today, so maybe we'll get you on for a future episode, but thanks so much.